Welcome back to the Two Stewards Show, folks. We are here today with Jonathan Wellum, and I'm very excited to have Jonathan on the show. And he is the CEO of Rocklinc Investment Partners, along with a whole bunch of other things that we'll get into. But you're a prominent Christian investor, so that's pretty interesting for us. Like, how does that work in investments? Does it work? I mean, you can tell us. And anyways, I just want to say welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here with you guys. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, tell us a little bit about Rocklinc, and I guess how you get started, how long you've been running, and what it is that you do at Rocklinc.
Yeah. Well, way back when I got involved in the investment business back in 1990 in the mutual fund industry. So from 1990 to 2009, I was in a company called AIC Funds, and during that time, I was the CIO, the Chief Investment Officer, the CEO in the later days, and portfolio manager. So that was a large mutual fund company, private company in Canada, and that grew quite quickly from very, very small embryonic business in Hamilton to the largest private mutual fund company in the country. We sold that to Manulife in 2009. And after 19 years of trucking across the country and in and out of all of the brokerage offices in every major city, I thought it'd be interesting just to do something on my own. So I set up Rocklinc in 2010, right after I left AIC. That was really geared to sort of a family office, look after some of my own wealth, and then friends, relatives, things like that, and just slowly grow it. And it's all private wealth management, so we're registered across the country as money managers, discretionary accounts. We also have some of our own funds that we have. And recently we just launched an ETF, so an exchange-traded fund that you can actually buy our investment product right on the TSX. Mm-hmm. And so that's going well. We've got a little over $40 million in that now. But the company was set up really just to be a good steward of capital. We are all Christians in the company now. Over the last number of years, I've added quite a few young guys. So I'm the old guy now. I've got guys that from 35 years of age all the way down to 22, and just driven, hardworking, fantastic Christian young men. And we're having a great time. And we just continue to build the assets. Most of our assets would be with Christians, just because people know us in that area, and we speak out on all the issues, so we're not shy. And having your own company, it works well because I don't have to worry about the compliance department coming down on me from TD Bank or Royal Bank. I can say what I want. I can speak out on the issues, and so that's given us quite a voice, and Christians have picked that up. So probably about 85-90% of our clients are actually Christians, and we have a fantastic database of Christians and a good strong contingent. So that's what we're really doing, just building and trying to protect assets, grow assets. It's a crazy environment we're in, and Christians need to be good stewards of their capital. And so we're just trying to facilitate that and help them be, plan well and give back to the kingdom. This is really, as we know, all God's money, and we want to be good stewards of the capital. And the day is urgent. We need to, again, be putting our money back into kingdom work, good evangelistic work, into our churches. We really need to rebuild Canada, and that's ultimately going to be through the gospel.
Yeah, that's something we talk about, or we ruminate a lot as well. Like how do we reform Canada? So maybe we'll get into that a little bit after. I had a question about the ETF. Is this? I think you mentioned it as an active ETF. Is that right? And
that's exactly right.
Is that an oxymoron? Because I'm not that smart, but I thought ETFs were passive.
Well, quite a few are, but really it's just an exchange-traded fund, so it can be active or passive. Many of the investors are quite passive now, so they're index funds, or you can buy a market, a segment of a market. So you say you want all gold stocks, or you want healthcare, and you just buy a portfolio of healthcare companies. What we believe in is we believe that the best way to make money is focused. Don't have a lot of investments, but know what you're buying. So for us to invest in 200, 300 stocks or across an index, it's just not that interesting.
Right.
We want to own 18 to 20 fantastic companies, well researched, positioned well given the economic situation that we're in, and then trading at reasonable prices because you don't want to overpay. So we're constantly just slowly grinding through companies. We'll have like 18 to 20 companies. We would expect that we would turn over maybe 2 a year.
Right.
And as we keep the portfolio fresh, as we find new opportunities, but always keeping the portfolio in the best companies that we know and that we understand, and trading at great prices. So that's that active approach. We love that. That's the challenge. I mean, that's what our guys love doing. Finding companies, talking to businesses, and getting the thrill of making some extra returns by ferreting out companies that other people aren't looking at.
Yeah.
And that's the fun of the business, right?
Yeah, for sure. The you talked about being an outspoken Christian. So the newsletters. I mean, there's certain companies. I'll look forward to their newsletters. I think is it Stone Ridge? I think usually have Stony Ridge. Always have a good one every year, and there's a few others. So you read them to get an idea on the market for guys like us, right? But reading through your newsletters, they're different. And like you said, you kind of say what you want. So there's some good solid investment updates and things in there, but then you've got a few other things that's put in there as well. So that's a bit of a change.
Yeah, I mean, as a Christian, everything's integrated, right? It's one worldview, and so when you think of the capital markets, your ethical and social and political issues affect the capital markets. Yeah. So, for example, recently we've had the Carney government pushing that Bill C-9, which is that hate legislation. That's really that's restricting free speech.
Yeah.
Well, a country that restricts free speech is going to restrict your capital markets. You're not going to create the wealth in your society. You're basically clamping down on communication and ability to communicate. So on multiple levels, that Bill C-9 is a very bad bill. I mean, first of all, it's the government's going to determine what's hate, and that's not appropriate, particularly when it attacks the scriptures, which is obviously not hate literature, it's God's word. But so that's horrible and terrible on one level, and attacking religious freedom. But any attack on free speech will attack the overall economic system. And it means that the government wants control. The government doesn't want you to critique them at the end of the day and speak out. And they want to hide their misdemeanors and basically the crime that they're doing. And so that's really the whole objective there. It's all top-down control. Well, if it's top-down control, you're not going to have a free market. You're not going to have a free exchange of ideas, free movement of capital. The government's going to step in and control more and more. And so I address that issue as an economic issue also, not just a spiritual issue. And because these things are all integrated, and I think sometimes Christians don't appreciate those interactions. So that's what we again try to address those issues. I mean, the whole issue of cultural Marxism, we've talked about that also. And how does that advance in the capital markets? Through DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. That controls, who goes on boards of companies. Well, if you're hiring people not based upon merit and meritocracy, but based upon their color and different, sexual activities that they're involved in or deviations, that's not good stewardship. You now are not having proper corporate governance. And so these things are all related, and we can see companies being poorly run, just like our government is very poorly run and has incompetent people. I mean, we have incredibly incompetent people throughout our government the cabinet. People are running the cabinets, and so this is a big problem if we don't have the best available, the top people with the best qualifications and merit. So again, you can see all these things there's an interplay with all of them, and so again, trying to get people to think holistically with a consistent Christian worldview.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree further. I'm very interested in macroeconomics and geopolitics, and people sometimes wonder, like, why do you need to know what's going on in Iran or China or whatever? Like, well, eventually it all affects us one way or another. And then, I mean, history as well. I always manage to get a Roman Empire, Roman Republic reference in, but I just find it fascinating, right? When you look through history and you're like, wait a minute, what's happening now? Like,
it rhymes
sun,
because
right?
I mean, we don't believe in a cyclical view of history because history is going to its appointed end, in God's sovereignty, but human beings repeat the same mistakes. And we see that in the biblical text as you read through the scriptures. I mean, the children of Israel, right? They repeated the same mistakes and same idolatry and so forth. So, yeah, I mean, history is an amazing tool to understand where we are today. And one of the things that I've talked to people that over at McMaster University, where I did my business degree, and I've gone in and done some lectures afterwards in my professional career. I've always said to them, you should have a course on economic history, financial history, because there's problems we're going through now: excess debt, fiat currency, get rid of the gold standard, and so forth. This has occurred over and over and over again in economic history. The tulip manias, different manias that people go through. They overprice assets, and you get these crazy speculative periods. Again, this is human nature, and so by looking at history, you hope to maybe curtail some of that, but if you don't study the history, you're doomed to repeat it, right? And that's just because of our own fallenness, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Brent, I'm dominating again.
I know it's hard to curtail. It's hard to curtail human nature, I guess. But there's a lot already. The cultural Marxism angle in your last newsletter. So you were looking at what a Christian response to that could be. So I'm curious to get your thoughts. So you have a lot of experience in the financial markets over years. I'm a lot younger. I haven't seen the different cultural changes maybe from the same perspective, but from your experience, over the years, how has maybe these cultural Marxist kind of influences, like you mentioned, board governance, kind of changed the industry, changed the way you approach investing? Do you just kind of have the same mindset from before and you stick to your guns, or what's changed for you in your approach when you look at these things?
And maybe you can just define, for our listeners anyways, the cultural, okay, maybe we know what Marxism is. What is cultural Marxism?
Right. Yeah, very important. Yeah, so when you think of Marxism, it's all about, pitting the oppressed class and oppressor. Who's oppressing the oppressed? So you have the two classes. In classical Marxism, it was the wealthy and over the poor, the bourgeoisie over the proletariat. And so that didn't really go anywhere within the Western world that much. I mean, it didn't get a lot of traction. And so a number of decades ago, they started thinking about, okay, can we bring this oppressed model into the cultural issues? And so can we create this opposition or division amongst people? And so cultural Marxism can embrace a lot of things. It can be different races. So then it starts to pit white against black, the white privilege. And I'm a black, I'm oppressed. And if you're white, doesn't matter. Even if you're a really poor white and you have no assets, you're still an oppressor, right? Just by virtue of your birth, which is just incredibly wrong and immoral, right? Then they get into sexual activities. So, all of a sudden you've got, if you're a heterosexual, basically if you're following the biblical order, you now have become the oppressor against lesbians or gays or transgenders and so forth. And so then they create that class also. And so it's dividing up everybody by all these different classes and different segments. That's what we mean by cultural Marxism. It's just creating division everywhere, no unity. So people start fighting each other, and we see this, worked out in so many different areas. And so in economics, it also comes into, as I say, the DEI, the diversity, equity, and inclusion, because it starts to pit people against other people. We've seen it also in ESG, which is the environmental social governance. And they use great terms. I mean, a lot of these terms are filled with such meaning that, from a Christian perspective, we go, of course we want to be environmental. Yes, we want to be good stewards. Of course we want great governance. But then you have to look at what the content is. They're not putting the biblical content that we understand, or even the Western, the Western view. So they're talking about environmental.Ey're not talking about Genesis 1-3. We have dominion over the earth, and we are to develop it and do it under the, and to glorify God and to look at the resources and use all these resources God's given us. They're talking about a green agenda where we actually worship the earth. The earth becomes God. and it's an idolatry, and then all of a sudden it's almost a deindustrialization. We're not going to develop our resources. We're actually going to become poorer. That's what we see in Canada. We're going to go back to living, pre-industrial age if we don't develop the resources, right? And so that's the environment. Social takes on all of the, again, a lot of the sexual deviations that we see in our culture from the norm, and they get into protecting the transgender, the two-spirit, you get all of the alphabet that goes on there, and it's got really nothing to do with the social, the way we would look at it, and social cohesion, families working together. It's anti-family. And then you look at governance. Again, it gets into almost what we've talked about before. Who's going to govern the company? Not the meritocracy. It's going to be, we have to have a black person. We have to have a woman. We have to have someone from Asia. We have to have a lesbian. We have to, and it's, again, going through all these categories, this intersectionality, they call it, this chart of all of these differences, and we have to cover them all off. When you think, like, what on earth is this? And what it does, though, it just creates opposition in the company. It creates enmity. It creates tension. Everywhere you go, there's tension in the culture because we're not unifying around our, being made in the image of God and following God's form for life. And so that's what we mean with the cultural Marxism, and it's devastating. It's really, really problematic. And I think that's what people are feeling. They're feeling an angst everywhere. There's really no harmony anymore. What links us together as human beings? They don't want us linked together as human beings. They don't want us working together, because they want to break everything down, and that's the plan. Of course, when they break things down, especially if you break the family down, which is the biggest bulwark against totalitarianism, is the family unit, the biblical family. If you break all that down, what gets bigger? The government. The state gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It taxes more. We look to the government as God.
I was going to say, why is that a problem? The state is bigger. They'll help us out,
and less and less freedom. And that's where the cultural Marxism ultimately goes, just like the economic Marxism. Statism, and it's a replacement of God, and that's what we're seeing slowly take place in Canada, and people are eating it up in some cases. And that last election we had in Canada, people said they really thought that we need this protection from Trump. We need protection from our leaders. We need protection from ourselves. We're our own worst enemies. Donald Trump, he's the least of our issues, right? In fact, what he's doing down there, I think, is keeping us more in check up here. It's causing our government to behave itself, just like getting rid of the EV mandates and some of these crazy things they're doing. You can't do that if the United States isn't going that way. But our problem, is that we're looking to the government to save us. Why did Mark Carney win that election when the Liberals have raped and pillaged this country for 10 years? He won it because people somehow looked to him as some savior, that he was going to protect us. And you're thinking to yourself, what on earth? When has the government ever protected us from anything? And yet, that's that brainwashing that you see people have picked up, and I think it's inculcated into a lot of Canadians' hearts and minds. Shouldn't be Christians, because our trust is in God. And if you have a strong church community and you have a strong family, your need for government is really low. Like, you just need them to watch the borders and have a military, and those are the two things that they don't do, right? So that's the problem, right?
Yeah.
Right?
I'm curious where you see the Canada-U.S. relationship moving forward. Like, do you have any predictions on that?
Yeah, I think that a couple of things.
Has Carney done a good job so far, or what's your thought? And then
he's done a terrible job, absolutely terrible job. And what makes it terrible is that there really hasn't been a lot of interaction. There's been no conversations. And my own personal opinion is that Donald Trump can be obnoxious, and he can say all sorts of things, but he'll do a deal. And he'll do a deal if you actually sit down and talk and work it out. And I think we will eventually work it out, because the two nations are really connected. It's very difficult to separate us on so many different areas. But we're going to be the net losers if we don't communicate with them. And that's what we're seeing, because the area we're going to lose is manufacturing. Okay, Ontario is going to be hit the hardest, because Trump wants more of the auto sector and that manufacturing in the United States. And he said this for 10 plus years. It's not new. Even in 2015, when he was running, I remember being down in Toronto talking to the CIBC economists at the time, saying, you wait and watch. He'll go after our auto sector. He wants our auto sector, not all of it, but you got to appreciate that Canada has had a pretty sweet deal on the auto sector, and we have an inordinate weighting in the sector. What I mean by that is the cars that we actually consume, we produce a lot more than we consume. And so it is tilted a little bit on our side. And that's because we had socialized medicine. There's a whole bunch of costs made it more attractive for the auto companies. We didn't, in the early days, Ontario, I mean, I can remember these days in the 70s. I was in high school, in the late 70s. This was incredibly profitable country, province. The Greater Toronto Area, the Golden Horseshoe. It was a very productive, low-cost energy. We had, our nuclear, and we were run largely by nuclear and hydro electricity. And we were leaders in those areas, so our energy costs were low. Our healthcare system was, obviously funded, it was socialized, which it should never have been, but it was. But the population was healthy, young, and so it was very viable at that time. And so it was great for industry to come in here. They had highly educated workforce, low crime, great communities to work in, very affluent. And so the auto companies took advantage of that and were well represented. Trump wants that back, and he's going to get some of that back. It's just and it's happening now. And so I think we need to realize that and work with that. Say, how do we protect a core base here? Because we can't afford to have too much of it run out. Now, if we have Carney running around doing deals with China and bringing in, Chinese electric cars, that's going to really irritate Trump, and rightly so. We should not have our enemies' cars in our country, soaking up all of our information, cameras all over them and so forth, and all that data going back to China. And so if we're going to start doing deals like that, that will antagonize them more, and I think that'll put more pressure for more of the auto companies to leave Canada. So I think Carney's done a terrible job. The other thing is he's talked about big projects. And I'm talking mining projects, oil and gas. So I did a study last fall on the last 10 years of the Liberal government, and there was 6 pieces of legislation that they passed during the Trudeau years that were devastating to capital coming into this country to develop our resources. And when I say devastating, they slowed everything down, permits, they made it difficult. It's not that it's impossible, but if you go to a business and you say, instead of it being 3 or 4 years to get a permit, it's going to be 10. And then even then we're not sure. Well, the money's gone.
So why did they put forward this legislation? Like, it's politically popular to.
It's all the green agenda. They don't want to develop our resources, and I think they purposely want to take Canada down a notch in the global community. I mean, there's no other way you can interpret it. They really are driven by the World Economic Forum globalist agenda. It makes no sense whatsoever, but that is. But we forewent probably about $600 to $700 billion worth of capital. And that's, again, out of the Fraser Institute and so forth. Those aren't my numbers, but people have looked at it. 600 to 700 billion, that's a $1.5 trillion of GDP over a period of years. $1.5 trillion. Well, our GDP is only like 3 trillion. And that's probably about 500,000 to 600,000 jobs also, again, over a 10-year period. These are huge numbers. And that's why Canada is not feeling very wealthy, because we haven't been developing our resources. We're bringing in a lot more people. We're spreading the economy over more people who are not adding value to the economy. Our infrastructure, our schools, our hospitals cannot take this, and we don't have the money to rebuild more. And so it's just squashing us. And so at a time when the world is looking for resources and needs resources because of digitization, AI, robotics, all of this technology, we're not developing our resources. So what's Carney done the last year? Nothing. He talks up a game, no money, there's been no further developments at all. And so he's slow walking everything. And so this is a big problem. I mean, Canada, with the U.S., I think we're going to lose manufacturing. What do we need to do more? We've got to start digging holes. We've got to get the Ring of Fire going up in Northern Ontario. We've got to get the oil and gas sector going. We've got to get pipelines to the coast. And there's a whole host of things that we can do. And this is an incredibly rich country, but our leaders are hurting us badly. And we've got to stop electing these same people.
Yeah. I feel like at some point Carney just has to give in and has to realize, like, we need oil and gas.
Yeah. Well, he's
I
giving
say that.
he's giving it a little bit, but so slowly. Like he's dropped
Yeah.
the EV mandates, but then he's putting up emission standards.
Yeah.
So it gives you a little bit here, and he, of course, has to do that. On the other hand, he's saying the emission standards have to be so tight that it's going to force you into EVs anyway. I mean, what's that all about? So
Yeah.
again, he's a very dangerous person, very dangerous. He's incredibly ideologically driven. I think will be he's been a little bit pragmatic on a few things just to show that he can move a bit, but
To
it is
what-
so
yeah.
slow. It
But
is so
to what
slow.
end? Like, I wonder when someone's ideologically driven, like if you follow this ideology to its logical conclusion, is that the kind of country you think Mark Carney wants to live in? Like,
It's a
he
great
has all
question.
the power, but all the
Yeah.
people are not happy. There's no wealth, and
Yeah.
it's full of immigrants who are burdening the systems. Kind of like you mentioned, right? The hospitals are overwhelmed. Like, what kind of person wants to live in that country and be the leader of it?
It's a great question. It's a great question, Brent. The one of the ways I would answer that is spiritual darkness. Some of these things are so complex that, and they make no sense whatsoever if you're thinking of your children, your grandchildren. You say, why are you basically sabotaging your own country, which is what
Yeah.
they're doing. I mean, it's a sabotage of our country. And I think it's a judgment of God on our country. I think it has to. You look biblically, you look at people, they make decisions that make no sense. And you go, why are they doing that? I think it's a darkness of the heart. I mean, if you look at Romans 1 and you see the progression of a society that rejects God, turns from God, the final stage is a debased thinking. Absolutely debased thinking. I think that's what we start to see when some of these government officials, because you're quite right, it makes no sense. I mean, a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old, if you explain some of this to them, would reason through a different way than what Carney's coming through. I mean, we could sit here literally in the next hour, draw out 30 things that we could do, 10 major things that we could do, and this country could be literally turned around very quickly. Mm-hmm. It's not complicated. But there's just a spiritual malaise and darkness across the country that is, I think, just really, really serious.
So can where Christians put their money help? And because this is kind of your business, I'm assuming, like private wealth management. I don't know that whole world that well, but if I'm a Christian and I'm investing in a company, like, can that help move the needle? Like which direction this goes and money talks. That's just what I'm thinking, right?
Yeah, let me answer it a couple ways. I mean, number one, I go back to a book that Francis Schaeffer wrote, No Little People, right? We believe ultimately that God is sovereign and God is in control and God is working out his purposes according to his will. And the biggest thing for us is to be faithful where he's placed us. And so what we need is a lot of faithful Christians, being faithful, good stewards, having children, raising their children, families, getting involved, starting their businesses. We need a lot of faithful people. And we need to pray. We need to pray a lot. And we need to pray that God is merciful and he's gracious and he can change things. Even, I'm an optimist because, I'm a Christian and I know the end of the story. And I think that God, things don't go in straight lines in God's world. There can be discontinuities, and that discontinuity be a work of the Spirit. And so I think that everything that we do, we can sort of think, well, that's not really going to make a difference. We be faithful. It will make a difference in God's kingdom, right? So I think that's the key we've got to always get our minds around. Don't view ourselves as insignificant. We are significant to God because we're servants of the Most High. And even in the Bible, you look through all the cases where God would just use someone that was totally insignificant and then change the world, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's where, I think that's what we've got to get back to. What's God's plan for my life? How can I fulfill the calling? How can I be as faithful as possible? How can I trust God? How can I evangelize and tell other people the good news of the gospel? Because we need changes of heart. We need a great awakening across the country. And we need a revival in our churches and an awakening in our culture, right? And I think that it can change. That we've seen that in history. You get someone. I mean, it was so encouraging to see, Charlie Kirk. Here's a guy who, never went to university, and he wanted to go to university and didn't work out and so forth. And meanwhile, he ends up having more influence on university students than anyone else probably in the last 50 years. And it's just phenomenal. And God uses someone like that. So I think that I think we just have to get back and just be faithful and be about God's business as much as we possibly can, and then see what God has in store. Right? We'll go from there.
Yeah, so it's interesting because we interview a number of guests on this podcast. We try to find experts in the field, and it feels like we always come back to this idea that of a grassroots, of a bottom-up approach, as opposed to like, what are we going to do to turn Canada around? Okay, we're going to get a new pipeline, and we're going to, get some Christians in government and do this, and it always seems like it comes back to like, no, be faithful in your sphere of influence. I mean, we can talk about Kuiper maybe, but it always seems to come back to families. And it sounds like you're kind of on the same wavelength, which seems like a really odd way to do things. Like if I want to make big change in the world, okay, I'm going to get married, like find a faithful wife and have a bunch of children. Like number one, we don't do that anymore, Jonathan. We don't have lots of children. Come on, I can't afford it. And how is that going to affect the world? And it's certainly not going to do it quickly, but I don't know. It seems like it seems like that's always the conclusion that we come.
Well, I think it's all of the above, though. I mean, I think that we do want to have Christians in Ottawa as MPs, and there are. I was there on October 8th speaking to a number of MPs, and most of those were Christians. And my best guess is in talking to some of the people there's probably about 35 MPs that are very strong Christians. And you can see them rising up and talking and speaking. So we need Christians throughout the culture, but they're being faithful to God's calling. We need Christians in the area of medicine. We need Christians in the legal area. I'm thankful for Andre Schutten in the Christian Legal Fellowship and the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedom, which is heavily influenced by Christianity, even though it's got some influences there. But they are again standing up to protect the church, protect our freedoms. And we need to have Christian lawyers, Christian doctors, and so forth. So it's in all of those areas. Christian finance. I'm in finance, so I want to be allocating capital. So we need Christians in all the areas, but we also have to be as faithful in all the areas. So it's a bit of both. And God can surprise us. He can put a leader in from almost nowhere, someone we didn't know can rise quickly, and be an exceptional leader, right? And we've seen this in different countries around the world too. So, I mean, when I remember in the 70s, we were all concerned about the Soviet Union. We talked about bomb shelters, and it was going to be a nuclear. It could be a nuclear war and so forth. And I remember all the Eastern Bloc countries of Europe, all under the Soviet control. Well, some of those Eastern Bloc countries now, I remember, again, meeting people who left those countries, the Czech Republic, Hungary, Poland, Romania. Well, some of those countries now are some of the freest in the world.
Yeah.
And they just flipped. Now, they've got challenges and there's issues and they need the gospel and so forth. I'm not minimizing that. But it's amazing how things can change quickly. And even I think with Donald Trump, with all his flaws, and he's got lots, and he's not our savior. But to me, there's no comparison between him and the Democratic Party. I mean, you'd have to vote and support Trump. I mean, it's just like night and day. But around him have come policies, some really good policies that are helping the country. Now, how far God will allow those to go, we'll have to see. But he'll. Doug Wilson, another theologian down in the U.S., he says God can use a crooked stick to draw a straight line.
Yeah.
And so, we look to the God. We look to him, and we do everything we can to maximize, the gospel and the influence of Christianity where God has placed us. But those little things are important in God's world because ultimately he's the one that arranges the deck, and he's the one that can change things so quickly.
But this time it's different, Jonathan. This time we have so much debt whereas before it was different. Like, I always want to get your perspective on the debt levels that we're at now. Like, is it different this time? Like the average person, I think before the show we were talking about inflation, and we talked to people in their 30s and 40s, and
Yeah.
they want to be able to take their foot off the gas, spend time with their kids, but it might not seem realistic. Like, is it going to be different this time? Like, is there some sort of, you say great awakening, and that's like a cultural, spiritual thing, but on the economic side with
A great reset.
the reset, yeah, like the financial side of things. Like, I want to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things. First of all, regardless of the economic environment, you still have to take care of your family, love the family, and serve the Lord, and raise them in the fear and admonition of the Lord. These things are non-negotiable, and you're still going to try to have a budget, even if no one has a budget around you, because those are the things that God commands of us, and we have to be faithful. Having said that, yeah, we're in a big mess. So if you go back to the early 70s, which is probably an appropriate place to go back for a number of reasons, but one of the reasons being is fiat currency became quite unhinged. Our currency became quite unhinged from a collateral standard, gold. Not that gold is the perfect remedy for everything, but it acted as a bit of a balance and it control on the government. So when Nixon got rid of the remaining gold standard, it wasn't a full gold standard then, but got rid of it. That was in the early 70s, 1971. The money printing and debt buildup started slowly, but then it just starts to accumulate and gather speed. It's like a snowball going down a hill, right? And so I remember in the early 80s when Ronald Reagan was the president, the U.S. went over $1 trillion, and they got 1 trillion. Wow, 1 trillion. Now it's 1 trillion every 4 to 5 months, right? Yeah. So 1 trillion. Now it's 38 trillion. And what you've seen, in just back of the envelope numbers, you've seen debt has grown at twice the rate of economic growth. And when you have 50 years of compounding is a powerful mathematical reality. When you have 3 to 4% difference between economic growth and debt growth for 50 years, that's where you get to 38 trillion, where the U.S. is now from 1. And their economy's grown, but half as much, if actually less than half. And so the debt is now so large that funding it is going to be virtually impossible going forward. So you have an economy. Just think about this: if you had total revenue in your family of, $5,500 because they have 5.5 trillion. So if you have 5.5 trillion in revenue, just go back to the government for a second. 5.5 trillion in revenue, and you have a $38 trillion debt. Now you think about that in the ratio of your own family, and you have 100 plus trillion, so 3 times what your on-balance sheet debt is in unfunded liabilities. And that's the present value. So today, what is the value of the promises you've made in Social Security and all these different social programs? It's over 100 trillion. And you have a revenue base of 5.5 trillion right now. It's an impossibility to actually pay that off. It's totally impossible. Yeah. So what the government's going to...
You just see these articles once in a while pop up where it's like, if everybody in the States who could started working right out of high school instead of going to college or whatever, that could boost the GDP and take care of the debt. Or if everyone stayed working for an extra 2 years or whatever at the end of their working age and didn't retire at 60, 65 or whatever, that could take care of this.
Yeah, I mean, it won't. No, I mean, the only what Trump is trying to do, and this is in the case of the U.S. and the U.S. is important because that's the reserve currency. It's the most important economy in the world, and so what happens there is very material and very important. What Trump is trying to do is he's trying to ignite economic growth. I mean, all of his policies are exact opposite to Carney. I mean, how do I bring capital in? How do I cut taxes? How do I cut regulations? How do I, free up as much mobility as possible? How do I bring back manufacturing? So on a reshore, that industrial base that was stripped out of the U.S. and shipped to the Far East and China, I want that back. So if he can do that, what he's planning is he's trying to get 4, 5, 6% economic growth. And if your deficit is about 3% of your GDP, 3%, and you can grow your GDP at 6%, but your deficit's 3%, you can start to control that debt somewhat, okay? And you keep a certain level of inflation, so you try to inflate some of it away. But if you can grow your economy at twice the rate of your debt, then their debt to GDP ratio will come down. Now that is a very tough balancing act, but that's all they have left.
That's assuming no crisis, no war, no
and so
pandemic.
That's what they're attempting to do. That's a heavy balancing act. Number one, I'm glad they're at least trying that, and it might at least mitigate some debt effects, but it's not going to eliminate the problem. Now that's the U.S. But if you look at Canada, we just saw this morning we lost 25,000 plus jobs. We're shrinking, and that's not a surprise. If you follow the Liberal Party policies, you're going to shrink. I mean, how can you grow when you're taxing, regulating, and not allowing capital to come into your country and develop your resources to the extent that you need to, right? And I mean, so Canada's in big trouble. UK is a basket case. I mean, they are in terrible, terrible shape. I mean, they really are in bad shape. Euroland is in horrible shape also. There's no economic growth in Europe. They're strangling themselves by, the environmentalist policies, taxation, demographics, flooding immigrants into the country who have no interest in, most of them in working and so on. And then you go to Japan, which is a write-off debt-wise. Their debt is the worst in the world. They make the United States look like Puritans. When you look at their debt, right? Their debt to GDP is like 350% debt to GDP. So you go walk, and then China, everyone looks at China, but guys, China's got a massive debt problem, and it shouldn't surprise us. You don't have to do any economic analysis to figure out that if you have a communist system allocating capital aggressively for 30 to 40 years, they are going to misallocate capital like no one's business. Mm-hmm. And that's what you've had. You've had malinvestment in China that is off the charts. Yeah, they got fancy bridges and they got buildings and that, but they got a whole bunch of empty buildings. And if you put up a beautiful building, it could be the most beautiful in the world. But if there's no one paying rent on it, and you're not getting an economic return on it, you just basically wasted that money. That is a dead loss. And so we see that throughout that country. And they also, as you know, back in 1979, put the one child per family policy. Now they're living out the devastating impacts of that. So they're going into free fall in terms of the demographics. So that's why Xi is trying to grab some land and some territories and trying to grab power because they are in massive decline, and Trump knows that. And that's why he's hitting them hard. Money's coming out of that country from a manufacturing perspective. So again, bottom line is you look around the world. Yeah, we are in for some major challenges, no question about it. So what do Christians need to do? They need to knuckle down, be careful about their debt, invest in themselves, be tough in terms of vocations, maybe start their own businesses, be resilient. Of course, trust in the Lord. Make sure they're strong in their faith, and so we come out stronger than the other people. Have the children, because whoever has the children ultimately is going to have the leg up, right? Because and train those children. Make sure they're in being educated properly in churches, and if they're going to schools, they should be in Christian schools or classical Christian schools or homeschooled. You cannot, in my view, put your child into the public school systems we have in this country, and they're demonic. I mean, they're devilish institutions. Unfortunately, that's just the reality. And so again, all of these things we have to just work away, hammer, trust the Lord, and take one day at a time, and do it all with joy. And enjoy. I mean,
being told joy.
Yeah, you have to do it. It's serious, but we have to enjoy each and every day that God has given us as a blessing, and not be negative, but just advance.
Yeah, it's easy to kind of slip into that. We're doomed. Like this is all going to fall apart.
But we see, if we're equipped with this information, let's act on it.
Yeah.
Let's act on it. Let's be proactive. Yeah, as Christians, that's what we're called to be, proactive. Let's be solution-oriented, and I think we might get more traction with some solutions, because We're not going to get them from Ottawa. We're not getting them from Queen's Park. You're not getting from City Hall in Hamilton, right?
Yeah. We do have hope that cannot be taken from us, so that
Yeah.
is a huge comfort.
Yeah.
But all the kind of backdrop you just painted, is that why you think like gold and silver are on a tear now? It seems to be all the rage right now. Hey, precious metals, gold, silver, going crazy. Is that because of the debt system that we're in, and people are kind of fleeing to that?
Yeah, there's no question, and there's no question. I think I'm surprised that gold. It took so long for gold to respond. And I think it's just people's indifference or lack of understanding. We've been printing and adding so much money to the money supply over the last couple of decades, and gold, as you know, it's plodded along. But I think the last little while we're getting catch up. And you know, the average investor does not have much gold. I mean, has very little gold. I mean, I'm in the investment business, and we've maintained. Right when I started Rocklinc, we had 15% of our assets in gold and silver related securities, and that's about 25% now. And we're highly unusual. What really precipitated the gold trade is the East. You know, money was going to the East, so China and India. The West has been really not buying a lot of gold up until just maybe the last year. And so it's been much more of an East trade and central bank trade. The central banks have been adding gold. Not our central bank, unfortunately. Mr. Carney, he, you know, according to his book and his values, gold is an old relic, and all you need to do is trust the government. Like literally, he says that. Which, when someone says that to you, you're thinking this person really is completely out to lunch. I mean, they really don't know what they're talking about. Because in history, whenever there's financial problems, you want collateral, and government is not collateral, or government trust is not there. So I think what you've seen is the eastern countries of the world, India, China, the BRICS, Brazil, Russia. They've been adding a lot of gold. And I think that's because they want to prepare for a world where the U.S. dollar is not as dominant. And it has been going down in terms of domination. They want something to replace the U.S. dollar and not be as dependent upon the SWIFT system, right, the economic system. And so they've been buying the gold. They've been way ahead of it. And they've been doing this quietly and accumulating it. And so it's only more recently that people are starting to wake up and see, hey, wait a second, maybe we should be doing that too. Because if the moneyed people are doing it, then there's something behind that. So I think that's been the trade more recently because of gold, because of the debasement trade. I mean, we went through the COVID situation. What did they do with COVID? They took an aggressive flu bug, made that into a pandemic, put that lie across the world, shut down economies, and then printed money, and then created all sorts of inflation. Because if you shut down production of goods and services, or you limit it, and then you flood this money into the system, I mean, it's impossible that you're not going to create inflation, right? Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what they did. And so all of a sudden, people have started to see inflation, and they're wondering, how do I protect myself? So I think that's the gold trade. Silver is an interesting one because silver trades off of gold, but it also is an industrial commodity. And silver has been, for the last 5, almost 6 years, the production of silver falls quite short of its demand. And so there is a major shortfall of silver. So this silver bidding up is real. And it is definitely real. And then if you add all of the digitization, the data centers, and all of the electrification and all of that, you're going to need a lot more silver, especially in the battery systems and so on. And so I think people are sort of waking up to the fact that silver's been depressed. I would argue held down by paper markets, not the real markets. And so what's happened in the last little while is people are demanding the physical. And so if you start demanding the physical and it's been hypothecated, or it's, you like in the paper markets, for every ounce of silver, there's like $100, and there's 100 ounces that trade. Like it's a 100-to-1 ratio. Well, if all of a sudden people start saying, hey, I want that silver, it's not there. And so that's what we're doing. We're exposing the weakness in the system, in the derivative markets, in the silvers market. So I think that's an interesting one. And of course, once people sense that, then you get the speculators in there, and then they start having fun. So my comment to people who are involved in the silver and gold market: keep your head about you, buy good assets, dollar cost average. Don't get scared out, but be disciplined, because these big swings are just telling you that there's a lot more to it than you think. And there's and I think we need to be careful.
How much was the recent gold came down a bit?
Well, silver was a 33% swing, I think, right? Top to bottom, intraday.
But I mean, today gold's trading just below 5,000. It started the year at 41.50. It's the best performing asset this year as of today, even with all that volatility. So you gotta be careful.
Yeah.
Silver started the year at 71.50. Today, last I looked, it was trading about 76. It's also a great performing asset. Now, it went to 120, if you can believe it. But that's just craziness. That's, I think, manipulation behind the scenes. There's some crazy things going on. And that's why I'm telling the people, you're going to have to look through that and have a strong stomach if you're going to be in some of these investments, because the demand for silver is there and the production is not. Silver is interesting also because only 18% of silver comes from silver mines. The rest of it is a byproduct. So it comes from copper mines, nickel mines, and stuff like that. So if you want to increase the production of silver, it's not easy. It is not easy, because it depends on copper mines and nickel mines. You know, we need more copper, so that's a good thing. But it's not an easy one just to turn the switch and away you go. And that raises the whole other issue that we're facing in the investment business, and that is a lot of people refer to this as the commodity super cycle. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason for that is because of two big issues. Number one, the demand for energy is really starting to increase. Why is energy going up? Because of data centers and AI, artificial intelligence, along with robotics and other, Internet of Things and so forth. So all of this Internet of Things, all of the robotics, the EVs, and the data centers, which are just amazing hogs. Like when you're using AI, you're using Grok or GPT and so forth, they take a lot of energy. And so if you want to get that energy, you need more uranium if it's going to be nuclear energy. If you want that energy, you're going to need a lot more copper. You're going to need more nickel. You're going to need, again, all of these resources, platinum, palladium. And so what's kind of interesting is this whole tech boom that we're going through, which is people think is just all virtual, is absolutely and utterly dependent upon the real world, the physical world, and drilling holes and mining. Mining is more important now than it was 25 years ago in terms of our GDP. So this is interesting. So that's why a lot of investors are looking at a lot of these metals and minerals as opportunities to invest in, because there is going to be a cycle here. If we continue to build out the data centers, then we're going to need a lot more copper. And copper, again, is in short supply. Copper, we need 70% more copper in the next 30 years if we're going to get anywhere close to these projections. Not even hit the projections, but close. 70% copper is huge. Like, where are we going to get it?
All the things you're talking about kind of go against the ESG, like the environmental. I think you brought up before, like the Bill Gates, kind of pivoted, right?
Yeah.
He's talking all the environmental language, but if we're going to need this energy, we got to harvest it somehow, right?
Yeah, that's the irony. That's the irony. And the other part of that is the debasement trade. So we have all this debt at the same time. So if you're trying to protect your capital, you want to own real things. And so that's another reason why people are saying, you know what, I just own a copper fund. I'd rather own a copper fund than have my money sitting in a GIC.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Because that GIC is going to get eviscerated over time from a purchasing power perspective. But copper, it's in the real world, it probably will protect me much more. And so that's why you got these copper ETFs, you got nickel ETFs, you got gold ETFs, silver ETFs, uranium ETFs. And people are going into all of these because, again, it's a way to protect their capital. So you've got the energy demand, which requires the resources, then you've got the debasement trade going on. But you're quite right. The green agenda, which was front and center, now is becoming a little bit
they turned the
pushed back
down a bit.
And Bill Gates, I think he did show his hand because he said, well, maybe the green agenda, the urgency, this existential crisis that they told us about, maybe it's not as existential as we thought, and is more important to develop our technology, because he can make more money now on the build out of power and energy
Yeah.
because of the AI than he can on the green agenda. So what's he do? He just shifts over to this one. Hopefully people see the hypocrisy and the fact that this existential crisis was not an existential crisis. It was one that was created by, the elites to grab more power and to make more money. And yes, we need to be good stewards, but we are not facing an existential environmental crisis. God is in control of our creation and our weather.
Okay, so I want to ask you another question about storing money versus deploying it. And I think this is one I've struggled with myself, but if I work and I spend my time and I build up some money, I can store the value of that over time in Canadian dollar, or I can pick gold or copper ETF, like you mentioned, or Bitcoin. Yeah.
Yeah. Or Bitcoin. Don't forget Bitcoin.
We'll
yeah.
get there. We'll get there.
Yeah.
But is there a calling for Christians? And how do you see this? Like, is that kind of like, if I just store my wealth in gold, let's say, am I kind of burying my talents, so to speak, or am I called to a higher standard to say, okay, I made this money, but now I have to invest it, or like it should produce something, right? Kind of in light of the parable of the talents, but then just from a stewardship perspective, understanding that we're in this system where there is debt, like we're in a debt-based system, money loses value. So if I store the value of my money over time, it's going to depreciate. So if I know that as a Christian, like, should I be deploying it into, because the minute you take a decision to invest, you're adding risk into it seems like it to me anyways.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, again, it's about balance, right? And when you talk about risk, I think that of all the people that should be prepared to take well thought out risks, because again, we don't know the future, only God does, it should be Christians, because we believe in the sovereignty of God and we trust God for the future. And so we should be future oriented and willing to cast our bread upon the water, as Solomon says in Ecclesiastes 11. And we don't know, I mean, in that passage, it's a great passage. I just encourage people to read the first 6 verses of Ecclesiastes 11. It's a bit of a recipe for how we should approach risk management. We cast it in different ways, but that casting is not just whipping it out. I mean, in the original, it's with approximation, like you're using some thought. But it is going into a few different areas because we don't know what God's going to bless. But he does promise that it will return to us in one form or another. Might not be physical. It might not be in physical or material things, but spiritual blessings too, right? I mean, so it's not, we don't believe in the prosperity gospel. That's not why we do it. But also, it also says that if you just look at the clouds, you're never going to sow, and if you look at the weather, you're not going to you never go out and reap because it always looks bad. And we looks bad now, but God says go and sow, and you can't reap until you sow. And so we must have faith and trust in God. So when it comes to investing, I think it's a balance. We're told that we need to prepare for our children and the next generation also, right? We're not here to just pretend we're going to be raptured tomorrow. That's not a theologically astute and proper way of looking at the scriptures. We need to think intergenerationally, not knowing what God has for us. So part of that is to get our capital working. I think we do need to put a good bit of our money into work, start a business and so on, but also some protection for our family and for the next generation. So that can also involve investing and putting some money aside. So I think it's a balance. And I also think it depends what's coming, where your heart is. I mean, the Bible's always, where is your heart? What's your intention? Where's your faith? Is it in God or is it in your things? So I think that's important also. So I think there's nothing wrong with setting aside capital, but it should be a reasonable amount. So it does, prepare for your family and the next generation. But we should also make sure that we're engaging. We're not hoarding it, just like that. Again, the parable. I'm going to eat, drink, and be merry. I've got my barns are filled, and that's it. And God says, no, your soul is going to. I'm requiring their soul tonight. Yeah. You're gone. Yeah. And so again, I think it is balance, and we need to figure that out. And I think every person's situation is slightly different, and work that out with the Lord, and make sure that our ultimate trust and confidence is in Him. And so forth. But we are to think intergenerationally. That's why we're doing this, right? I mean, I've got 2 granddaughters now, and two of my 4 kids are married, and hopefully more grandchildren on the way. And so all the work I'm doing now, hopefully, is for them and for their children, and until Jesus returns, which we don't know exactly when that's going to be. We know he's coming, but that could be a little while.
So you didn't have we were hoping you had the scoop on that, but I guess not.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll have to get the other expert.
If I gave you a date, you should throw me out.
I've struggled with it myself because, so, growing up as a kid, grandma gives you $2 and a birthday card, and she's like, put this in the bank and save it, right? And now having read kind of all these books on, the debasement that you mentioned, that money is losing value. So if I understand that, then as a Christian, there's something inside of me is just like, I feel like I'm squandering my wealth if I just save my money. And that almost, it's like taking this old wisdom that is almost seems like the biblical right thing to do is like work hard and save and be frugal and be resourceful with what you have. And then, but in the current economic world, it's hard to live that out when you understand, like, I'm losing this. Is that not?
Well, you try to find places to save your money that will protect you from the purchasing power loss, right? And so, I mean, I'm running an investment business, so I've put capital in my business. I was just meeting with someone today where I'm considering a fairly significant capital investment in something that will further the marketing of our business and getting our name out a bit more and stuff like that. So that's an investment. And I'm going to spend that money so that I can then create, more opportunities to grow our business and to be able to serve more clients. So part of that savings goes into investments also. Even when you're buying a stock, you're investing in that business. You're providing capital for that business. And even a GIC is providing a debt instrument for the bank, and they're investing and they're going. So unless you're just literally sitting in cash underneath your pillow, then that's more or less dead money, if you will. But I do think there's a balance. We still need to save. God says, be prepared, right? We have to have some resources. You don't spend everything. Mm-hmm. I mean, someone might be called, when I say that, I mean, some people go to the mission field and they don't have much, and God calls them to very difficult circumstances, and they really can't save much, right? And then they need other Christians that have saved to be able to help them sometimes, right? So if you don't have excess, again, in the New Testament, in the Ephesian church in Ephesus, different occasion, in Corinthians also, part of that was people with excess savings could help others. You can't do charity unless you have savings. So savings.
Did you hear that, Mark Carney?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. That's true. So again, it's all these. Be balanced.
Yeah.
It's about balance, and God is not against savings, depending on how you're going to use it and wisely. And so I think again, these are all things that we need to consider based upon our circumstances and what God's called us to do. Sometimes we can give away 80% of our money. People say, how much money should I give away? I mean, there's Christians that have been incredibly wealthy. They're giving 80% of the money away on a regular basis, and they still live very well. Others, it's going to be a smaller amount. So I think that's between you and the Lord, and really needs to be thought through wisely with good stewardship and biblical wisdom.
Do you think we probably should start wrapping up soon, but just sort of airy-fairy, like, do you think we could ever get back to sound money? Do you think that's possible if we...
Well, we might be forced to.
Well, this is my theory, right? Yeah. That eventually, we're at the end of a debt cycle and a debt super cycle. Something's going to break. It's going to be terrible. I'm very doom and gloom. And, I may have to have like cows and chickens at my house, so to trade with people. But yeah, can we get, as Bitcoiners, we have this idea that, hey, listen, Bitcoin is sound money. And if we could just get on a Bitcoin standard, that would fix a lot of things. And I know that's not everybody's ideal, but even just the sound money. I mean, we tried it with gold, and really the gold standard, by 1971, I think that was just an acknowledgement that, it doesn't work, guys. We don't have the gold. You gave us all our gold. That was the U.S. And we actually have way more dollars out there than there is gold. And Nixon just kind of admitted it. So, can we, I don't know. What are your thoughts on the whole, can we have sound money? Will we ever get to that point? Are we going to be forced to?
Yeah, we can have sound money. I mean, you just have to back it with some hard assets, some real assets. And I think we're going to be forced to have sounder money, whether it's sound the way we would like to have it. But if you lose confidence and there's a run on money, and I think that's just a matter of time before
no trust in the
then the only way you can restore that trust is to put some collateral behind it.
Yeah.
And I think so. I think money could be collateralized in the future, and I do believe that gold or some other substances will play a part in that. Now, if you look at China, India, Russia, I mean, they're trying to collateralize their currencies with gold. That's who's been buying all this gold, and they have a lot more. I mean, China says they have like, the amount that they have is about, they say it's about 25-30% of what the U.S. has. That's what they report. But most of the reports, there's 8,000 tons or something in the U.S. and they have about 2,000 or 2,500 tons or something in China. But most people suggest that it's probably double what the U.S. has, a lot more.
Yeah.
They've been, basically hoovering it in for years, right? And so you are getting gold becoming more important. The other way it works is through net transactions also, which I'm sure you're aware of. So Russia has its rubles, and they can buy from the rupees from India, and they can trade back and forth. Well, they only have to settle in the difference, whatever the difference is. And they've decided in some cases to settle that in gold. They're already talking about that now. And so there's ways that they're trying to establish the ability to trade in different currencies that are maybe not as reliable. So we'll have to see. But look, if the system gets shaken to the foundation, they're going to have to collateralize it and give confidence again, right? See, these other currencies around the world that have collapsed, they'll often bring the U.S. dollar in.
Yeah.
But if the U.S. dollar isn't there, and it's not going to, at some point, I mean, the current trends, it won't be, right?
Yeah.
I don't know when, and I don't know exactly how it'll happen, but we'll lose confidence in that, and then they'll have to do something to build the confidence in people's hearts and minds. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I mean, people have to realize that the U.S. dollar, I think most people know this. I mean, it's already lost. In the 1970s, it lost 75% of its value. I suspect in the next decade, we'll lose again at least 75 or more percent of the value. So, I mean, it's losing and losing and losing. It means gold was $35 an ounce when they took it off the standard. It's now almost $5,000. So you're talking about 99% loss in value versus gold. And if people go back in their minds that are old enough, I remember some of these transactions. I was born in '61, but I remember my dad buying real estate up in Perry Sound cottage area. You could buy a lot for $2,000, a couple acres on an island or something, beautiful property. I mean, those are going for $300,000 or $400,000 now, right? So if you take 2,000 as a fraction of 200,000, just an example. I mean, you're starting to see the kind of depreciation that's taken place in value in hard assets and across all hard assets. And that's again because of inflation and our standards of living. Governments become too large. I'll often say this. In the 1960s, total government spending, all three levels in Canada, was about 20% of GDP. It's now just under 50%. So, you can't run a productive, growing, wealth-producing economy when almost 50% of the assets are sucked up by a public sector, which is inefficient, ineffective, unaccountable, and wasteful. And so we ultimately, the one of the solutions economically in Canada, in the Western world, is take a machete or a hacksaw to government. We have to slash it down and privatize massive amounts of what the government's currently doing.
I thought we could be our own best customer. I thought that was going to be,
It's a circular.
as it turns out.
Oh, man, yeah. All these stories, and it sounds so nice on paper, doesn't it? And then until you introduce...
Are you running for election?
Yeah, until you introduce Genesis 3. And then you realize, no, there's actually a fall. And that doesn't work in a fallen world at all.
Yeah.
We need checks and balances and discipline and competition and all of those things to keep everybody honest, right? Yeah.
100%. Okay, Brent, we should...
the only question remaining is the Bitcoin one, but do we have time for that?
We can do a quick one.
Well, yeah, I'm curious to get your thoughts on Bitcoin. I read your latest article comparing like Bitcoiners to Gnostics, but I'm curious, like, this has popped up in your career. You've seen the sound money. You've talked about gold, Bitcoin, something new. Like, how do you see that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I wrote that article not to necessarily take shots at Bitcoin, but really maybe some of the Bitcoin maximalists, I guess, the ones
Yeah.
that really take it to, this is going to be our salvation, our economic salvation, this Bitcoin. And I think that to me smacks of a neo-Gnosticism where it's the virtual is more important than the physical. And they talk about that, right? And the reason I got into that is because I was studying transhumanism and post-humanism. That whole idea that we can use technology and get rid of our physical bodies. This is our problem, our physical body, because it rots and it decays. But if we can get our mind into a machine, we can upload it, we can live forever. I mean, and there are serious people in this world who believe that. And they have no understanding that we're made body and soul, body, spirit, and soul, depending on whether you're bipartite or tri. But regardless, bodies, God's made us a body, and we need a new body, and we need the resurrection. As our Lord's the first fruits, right? And so they reject all of that. So they get into all of that. So then I got intrigued in thinking, well, Bitcoin, the maximalists, the ones that really take it to the extreme, they really smack of that neo-Gnosticism, that sort of a new Gnosticism where the virtual will save us. And, you know, you've had Satoshi comes along almost like a prophet. He drops this in our lap and then takes off. And there's all these parallels, which are kind of fun. That's why I wrote the article, to have a little bit of humor. But, I mean, I'm sympathetic to Bitcoin. Because I don't trust fiat currency. My skepticism just comes in where I just don't like something to be, you know, my wealth tied up in something that's just digital on a computer, you know, binary code. I still am very physical, and maybe it's my age. I still want to get back to something that's tangible, I can touch and feel. And so that makes me nervous. But I hope it works out successfully. The blockchain itself is amazing. I mean, to me, that's where all the value is. It's the blockchain. That blockchain is fantastic, where you can just legitimatize people directly and do direct business and get rid of the intermediaries and stuff like that. Fantastic. Whether Bitcoin itself, as being on the blockchain, is super valuable, I guess time will tell. Time will tell. I would just caution people, you know, beware, be careful about allocations. Again, just like you wouldn't with gold or silver either, go and all of a sudden, you know, go in all sorts of debt and leverage yourself up, or make that all your portfolio. That's concentration. That's not biblical wisdom. Biblical wisdom says diversify, be careful. So just, again, a balanced approach, I think, will keep you out of trouble. And if it doesn't work out, then you've got other things. And if it works out, fantastic, you know. But as I say, the model and the idea itself, I'm very, very sympathetic to, because I don't trust paper money at all. And it's been completely corrupted. You know, as Isaiah says, they've watered down our silver with dross, right?
Yeah.
And nothing new. I mean, people need to go back to Isaiah 1 and read what was going on. Whenever you have a depraved culture, you know, they're watering down your money.
Yeah.
Away you go.
There's your Rome.
Yeah, there's a Roman,
Come full circle.
Empire all over again. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it is interesting. Like, I know I'm the worst. I'm like, we gotta wrap it up, and then I keep talking. But the Bitcoin and the Gnosticism, because we've seen, because we've talked to a lot of Bitcoiners and know a lot of people in the community, right? And there is like a thirst for spiritual truth for Bitcoiners, because they almost always follow the same journey. They realize that, well, fiat money can't be trusted. Like, I've been lied to, right? All my life I've been told that, it's the government, trusted, that, you know, they take care of the money, and then people realize, and maybe they get into Austrian economics or whatever, they realize, like, wow, so there is actually, it's not true, but there could be sound money. And so they look to Bitcoin. So they realize, okay, that tells me there could be truth, actually. And, you know, these are typically non-Christians. So you're like, wait a minute, not everything is relative. Not everything is, postmodernist. There's an actual standard. And so there could be a standard for money. And then they're like, wait a minute, if there's a standard for that, what else is there? And so usually health is the next thing that they realize, like, okay, you know what? There's actually a purpose to everything, and I can actually take, you know, all the things about food, the food pyramid. They lied to us about that too. And there's
Yeah.
truth in nutrition and food.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
get healthy that way and they start working out. But then they come to spiritualism. And they're like, okay, so I've realized that there's absolute truth in certain areas, but like, what is the absolute truth? And this is where you see people become very, like, just, yeah, pretty out there when it comes to the spiritual aspects of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But then we've also seen it as a tool for evangelism, which is, you know, kind of out there, but it's like Bitcoiners are a great harvest field for Christianity because they are so close. They see that we've fallen, our economic system has fallen, it can't be trusted.
Yeah.
It could be redeemed. And like, okay, that's just in this view of eternity. That's like, what is it? It means nothing, right? It's a blip. But, you know, with my soul, okay, are we fallen? And typically they become more conservative and they look at the different agendas out there and be like, no, I reject all this. And, you know, I'm become pro-family, all this stuff. And then they realize like, wait, I'm still missing something. What is that? So
no, I think that's a great observation. I think that's true. Because again, secular humanism, Darwinianism is completely irrational. It doesn't work. It's no meaning, no purpose, no values. There's no base. And so we see that also with the COVID, with the healthcare issue, right? I mean, people sort of trust their government, right? Again, I don't know why, but you know, and who turned out to be the people you did not want to trust when it came to the COVID analysis, and was the public health officials. They were they were lying to us all the way through, right? And so again, that people started to say, well, what's going on there? We see evil. I mean, it's amazing how many people said, we're seeing evil here. They're shutting down certain businesses. They're, the mental harm to children. This is brutal. For what? And there was no risk for children of dying of COVID, like zero. If you're under 20 and you're healthy, there was like zero risk. The only people who were dying were heavily compromised people, right? And so, but they lied. And then they lied with the vax too, right? And so I think this has awakened to people that there is evil. And there's a lot of commentaries, like the one gal, her name's just escaped me in the States. She was a feminist and wrote, she flipped over. She said, I just see this as evil. I forget her name
was it
now.
Naomi Klein, was it? Or?
Yes. Yeah, it was it Naomi? Yeah, but it doesn't matter. But there's a number of them, and it was interesting because they said, well, if there's evil, it's got to be good. Because again, how can you define evil if you don't have good? Mm-hmm. And so the spiritualism, there's a lot more going on, I think, in young people searching, and this is a good thing, because all of a sudden they realize, no, there has to be moral absolutes. If there are no moral absolutes, then you can't live consistently like that, as you know, because the greatest proof for the existence of the Christian God is the impossibility of the contrary. I mean, it's a presuppositional approach. I mean, we assume the biblical God is alive and well. Every time we open our mouth, we think, we talk, we reason, we pass our judgment on each other and so forth. I mean, we're in his universe and we can't get out of it. And so to the extent that you've tried to ignore God and live without him, it doesn't work. And so all of a sudden people go, we got to come back to standards. And so I agree with that. And I think that's a very good analysis. And I think we're seeing it and throughout all of the areas of our culture, people are going, hey, this isn't working. There's something more. And there is something more. There's the Bible, there's God, there's the triune God who's created the heaven and the earth, right? And there is an order, as Francis Schaeffer said many years ago. If you want to maximize freedom, you have to have form. But whose form? God's form. Right? We all operate within a restricted form. The issue is, who tells us what that form is? The Creator. That's what we want to follow, his form. That'll maximize our freedom. If you think you can get rid of his form, you can maximize, of course, heartache, chaos, and brokenness, and harm and damage everywhere you go. Yeah.
And we're seeing it. So
awesome.
Sorry, you said
no, I said that's wonderful. We can leave it there.
I think so. We will. That's a good spot to end. Where should people go if they want to? Rocklinc, I guess. What's the website?
Yeah, just rocklinc.com. Just remember that Rocklinc, we spell link. If you're in Hamilton, you know the link. It's with a C at the end, so it's ROCKLINC. So link with the C at the end. Rocklinc.com. You just email info@rocklinc.com. Go on our website, or you can hit up any of us there. There's phone numbers, and that's probably the best place to contact. We'd love to hear from people. Yeah, if you want us to take a quick look at your portfolio, give you a free look at your situation and give you an analysis. Yeah, that's what we're in the business of doing. We love it, and just give us a call and we'll service you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your time today, Jonathan.
Great. Thank you very much, guys.
And thank you, listeners, for staying with us. Until next time.
Steward your wealth wisely.